Welcome to the show, everyone. We have a very, 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 very special guest. He has maybe spilled my coffee way too many times, laughing at his tweets over the years. He has hooked us up with Fantasy Game through articles and podcasts throughout that time when he was at NBC, when he was at PFF. And now you can catch all of his analysis, podcast, and the rest of his work for free at fantasylife.com. We have Ian Hartitz. Welcome to the show, my man.
Great day. Be great, man. Appreciate you having me on and the kind words. But yeah, just, as I was saying, where we were chopping up before the show, just delightful to find someone else willing to talk an hour of ball here on a random yet lovely Tuesday in April. So got the NFL draft coming up. Obviously, a lot of big stuff is going to happen there. But yeah, man, and the fantasy football world, there is never a dead week. We can always be getting better. So yeah, man, happy to be here.
Hell yeah, man. That NFL draft right around the corner. You have been going in on these prospects coming into the NFL with some really in-depth breakdowns. I've checked them out over at Fantasy Life, and just providing that balance of just enough information for people to really get a good overall gist of these prospects coming in. I highly recommend you guys check those out at fantasylife.com. I want to start real quick with running backs, right? And then we'll hit on this wide receiver class and this quarterback class. There was a lot of talk about this supposedly being the worst running back class that we've seen in a while. Yeah. Do you think that sentiment has held true, like as we have gone through draft season?
I think so, man. And it comes down to both the work that we've seen guys like, my coworker, and I know you just had him on the pod, JJ McCarthy, where I'm looking at his, rookie RB supermodel. And yes, Jonathan Brooks is pretty clearly his best prospect in this draft class. But looking at the entire model going back to 2018, like he's not even cracking the top 20 overall. And I think accordingly, we see that reflected with the draft capital on hand. I mean, I don't think anyone would really even be surprised if we don't see a guy hear their name called to position until round 3 actually comes along. So look, could we see someone break out and just, absolutely blow away expectations? Of course. Kyron Williams was a 5th round pick with a horrible athletic profile. And now the dude's like a consensus top 5, running back going into 2024. So when we talk about, all year long, seemingly from August to December, the idea that these running backs don't matter, we now find ourselves in those couple of months where I think, maybe pretend a bit too much to know what we're talking about with this very position. So again, always, like, as we know, tends to be more of an opportunity and landing spot based position. And yeah, just getting our beaks wet and knowing a little bit more about these guys is never going to hurt. But just based on, again, what some of the models are telling us and then what the NFL draft capital expectation is telling us, certainly doesn't seem like we have, a Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, the sort of back that we just know, regardless of where they land, can break out. Not so sure that's existing in this class.
Yeah, compared those guys getting, top 10, top 12 picks in the NFL draft compared to, like you said, some of these guys might not be taken till the 3rd round. Maybe the first guy might not be taken off the 3rd round, right? Until the 3rd round. So you got, guys like Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, these guys, potentially maybe have the chance to be top 10 dynasty backs at some point, maybe, right? But, it's going to take a lot, for that to happen, right? I do think that, there are a few polarizing names, in this class. Blake Corum is one of them. Braylon Allen, another one. Some have them, really high in their rankings, some pretty low. I'm not that as high on Blake Corum as many are, but I'm leaving some room, right? Like if Jim Harbaugh takes him. But, it starts here, right? His career efficiency numbers, aren't great, but I'm wondering how much this last year, after a torn meniscus affected that, right? Because he was relatively efficient sophomore, junior years, and then really dropped off the efficiency cliff this past season. Can we expect some of this, maybe the pre-injury Blake Corum at the next level? Or is this one of those things where it's just like, well, if he lands in the right spot, it's the right spot. He gets the opportunity just like he did in college and he'll be all right.
I don't even think we need to say right spot. It's just land on the Los Angeles Chargers, right? That's what we're all thinking here with this. But no, look, and this is why I think as much as we want to be able to just plug, 5 or 6 data points into a model and evaluate everyone and be perfect at it, like we need to add this sort of context to it. And I think he did a good job laying it out where, yes, if you look at Blake Corum in the 2022 season, my God, I think the dude's plan was to go ahead and come out early, but sadly, again, suffered that brutal season-ending injury, just before that Ohio State game. So, I mean, how many, like, I'm sure we've all seen the play a million times, that one change of direction, like 50-yard touchdown against Indiana from 22. Like, you see people explain away the entire 23 season, which is like, oh yeah, look at this one run from before he got hurt and everything should be fine. So, some guys like Brett Whitefield, who I do respect their opinion on film, you can look down the stretch, the Ohio State game, the Penn State game, even the Bama game. Like, you can put together a solid 90-second highlight that does seemingly demonstrate that Corum was improving as the year went on. But man, I tried to compensate for that. Even looking at Corum's 23, first 8 games versus the last 7 games, his yards per carry, his yards after contact, his missed tackles forced, like, they all actually plummeted. Now, I do think a lot of that is facing tougher competition during the final 7 games of the season versus the first 8 games. But do we actually think, again, that the man who scored more touchdowns at Michigan than any other player in their, storied history is actually going to be someone that, is all of a sudden going to leap off and show us something we didn't see in 23? I don't know, man. I don't know. It's tough. He has such short arms. Dave Brugler's pointed that out as being a problem with his pass protection skills. We never saw him get overly involved as a receiver. And for someone that is, a goal line hammer, like, it is concerning to see him, only standing 5'8". So it was something like, let me see, I looked this up earlier, because he's got that kind of Gus Edwards stat to him, which ironically he could end up in the same backfield as him. But Blake scored 27 touchdowns in 2023. And let's see, only 4 of them were actually longer than 6 yards out. So honestly, it relates a little bit to the JJ McCarthy factor. We're like, what if we just take, 10 of those touchdowns from inside the 3-yard line, make them passing scores, maybe get a different idea of this Michigan offense. So overall, I think he's good. Is he great? I think a great player would have had better numbers in 23, but given the injury, maybe he does go ahead and improve here moving forward.
Greg Roman didn't give J.K. Dobbins more than 15 carries in any game in his rookie season, Gus Edwards was there, getting
Mark Ingram too, I think, right? That was
Mark Ingram was there too. Yeah, even when Mark Ingram got banged up later that year, still didn't happen, and Gus Edwards is still taking half the work, and it still bothers me to this day. And we might see that happen once again in 2024.
Dobbins, man, pre-injury Dobbins with some of those jump cuts that he had going on, man. I hope he can get back, man, but that's not looking good.
I was so high on Dobbins going into last season.
Good reason.
Like, I was getting so much shit for it. Man. Like, but
the process,
then,
bro. The process.
And then the first game happens. I'm like, ooh, look at this. He's getting all the work.
So good.
He's getting all the work. And then all of a sudden, brutal.
No, I remember I'm a Columbus, Ohio lifer, diehard Buckeyes fan and all that. And like, to see Dobbins just immediately start as a true freshman out of the gate, and just some of the plays he was able to put on film, the long speed, and then again had that ACL and then an Achilles on top of it. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up, because I will say, looking at this Achilles injury, shout out Matt Kelly over at Player Profile. I mean, he was telling me about this doctor's trip he had in the last couple of years, where the doctor was kind of explaining to him how new sort of scientific technology with surgeries involving the Achilles is going to make it more akin to basically an ACL tear in the future. Now, whether that's right now or whether that's going to be in a couple of years remains to be seen. But hopefully, man, we can get these running backs who do unfortunately suffer the Achilles injuries improving, because at this point, it's like Deontay Foreman is the kind of feel-good story, and then it's everyone else. So Cam Akers obviously with 2, ruined Arian Foster's career, like just such a devastating injury. So fingers crossed for Dobbins. I know he's gotten some workouts, but so far still very much that unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, man. I was hoping that maybe he could land maybe Dallas. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they could take a shot on him. And plus, like, whoever signs him, it's going to be a prove-it deal, right? It's going to be a cheap contract.
Veteran
so
minimum.
Have opportunity.
Why not go ahead and find out? It's not like a Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley contract we got to do. I'm shocked the Eagles didn't try to do something like this. I was,
Me too.
Absolutely railroaded by Eagles fans in the mentions yesterday, which, hey, it's part of the job, man. It's all good out here. I can always I can always close out that phone and things will be okay. But, the fact, and I thought the Devonta Smith extension was good. Everything Howie has done, I believe, over his tenure as Eagles GM is more good than bad. But save me the idea that giving Saquon, 3 years, $37.75 million was all of a sudden a brilliant move. I feel like no matter what the Eagles do now, people will just, make excuses to rationalize the fact that it was a great move. Because I thought last year getting Swift for cheap, signing Rashad Penny to a prove-it deal. You still got Scott and Gainwell. Yeah, makes sense. Perfect. Keep doing it, guys. And now the Cowboys seem to be doing it. So that part just, again, the Eagles specifically, like people will be like, well, actually, this was smart. And it's like, no, we can call out a dumb decision from Philly just like anyone else.
Well, the Cowboys made that decision with Zeke, and we see how that turned out after they gave him his big deal. There's a reason why the Giants didn't re-sign Saquon Barkley, and now the Giants are probably happy that their division rival ended up potentially making that mistake. It's not to say that Saquon can't produce this year, but to give him that type of money is not the way that, listen, Howie's a smart GM, but this one was definitely a head scratching move for sure.
I mean, it's the only team. It's the only team in the NFL that doesn't need a short yardage beast running back because of the cheat code they have with Jalen Hurts and the tush push. They continue, even with DeAndre Swift, someone that I think we can all agree is a very high level pass catching back in the NFL. Dude was averaging like 5 receiving yards per game during the second half of last year. It's an offense that barely ever uses this running back, and then for them to decide all of a sudden they need a premium option at it, I'm sure Saquon will be good in Philadelphia, but in the year 2024 with a salary cap, who the hell was watching Eagles games last year going, oh, man, if only they had a better running back here. Exactly. How about you fix your damn secondary that's full of 30-plus-year-old dudes, man? Oh, well.
100%. Exactly. Now, moving back to these running backs coming out of college, I have a question for you, man. When you see someone like Bucky Irving, okay, who has had a very efficient college career, and then he bombs the combine, and you realize he's not as good of an athlete as he might look sometimes, and he's undersized on top of that. Like, I want to like him, right? And I do. This is a more of a selfish question because I want you to tell me that my priors are correct. But should I just be thinking with my brain here and not my heart? When it comes to someone like Bucky in dynasty rookie drafts?
Look, it's one of those things where I think anytime we see the sub 200-pound running back without, an overly enticing, and in his case, just a downright piss poor athletic profile, we should be concerned. But the one thing Bucky has going for him in the year 2024 that's especially important is the ability to catch passes, man. And yeah, we've seen guys over the years where they're in college offenses. Wisconsin's never really going to throw the ball to their running backs regardless of who they have out there. So honestly, like, even though I kind of held that a little bit against Corum, I think that's another situation where, again, we're not exactly seeing, 150-plus reception running back after another leave that college. So the fact that Irving at Oregon was able to rack up 95 catches, 785 yards and 5 scores as a pass catcher, man, that's the sort of skill that I think we could see translate at a high level, in the NFL. So shout out Dane Brugler, the beast, again, trying to lean on, the best dudes in our industry when I'm trying to get my own evaluations here. But Dane actually comped Bucky Irving to Michael Carter, which I think would actually be a fairly high-ish, outcome for him. And I say that like as a compliment. Michael Carter, my God. His rookie season, especially, it was him and Javonte Williams were the number 2 running backs in the NFL in terms of missed tackles force per rush attempt. I mean, what the hell were they putting in that water cooler down there at North Carolina? So with Bucky, man, it's one of those things like, can he find an offense that is willing to give him that 3 down or at least, the 200-plus touch role? Because, okay, it's one of those things where is he ever going to be the Bijan, Joe Mixon guy, pushing for 300 carries per season? No, probably not. But look at the overall RB1 from 21 to 22. Austin Eckler, like, that's the role that we need Bucky Irving to try to find. Now, obviously, not every NFL offense is willing to give, a running back the 80-plus targets, pushing towards 200 carry sort of role. So going to be landing spot dependent. But hey, like, the one thing that I've learned from trying to evaluate these draft prospects, while it's okay to have pre-draft opinions on them, like, let's let the NFL draft capital and the landing spots do a lot of the talking, especially for these running backs. Because as much as, again, we do have some noted, and I think accordingly, like, it makes sense to have these negatives about Bucky Irving, but all of a sudden, if the Cowboys take him in round 3, and that's the only running back they draft, we're going to be a hell of a lot higher on him than if the 49ers decide to, take him in round 4 as a clear-cut backup. So I'm not out on him. And again, one of the things I do try to look at before every draft is, at a minimum, what quarterbacks have demonstrated the ability to rack up rushing production and what running backs have demonstrated the ability to catch passes. Because in our lovely game of fantasy football, those are the 2 archetypes that we consistently see kind of buck the trend of fantasy points correlating to real life success. It's rushing quarterbacks, because sacks for some reason don't count as negative, fantasy points. And it's the receiving running backs, because we still don't have a good system for fully measuring reception. I mean, I make the jokes like every Monday during the football year where you'll see a running back catch a pass for -1 yards and get blasted. And it's like, okay, that's the same amount as PPR points as a sick 9-yard run from Derrick Henry that has, 6 broken tackles with it. So again, with Bucky Irving, I think another comp was Theo Riddick was one I saw thrown out there. So probably not going to be, this consistent top 12 running back, but in the right situation, pass heavy offense, willing to use him like that. I'm not calling him out. I'm not counting him out just yet.
Love to hear it. I mean, listen, he would have to be a little bit of an outlier, but I could see it happening.
That's what April's for, baby. Let's find some outliers.
All right. Another thing, April's for. Who is your sleeper running back in this draft class if you had to pick one?
Let's go with just the size speed freak, man. Isaac Guerendo. If Isaiah Pacheco can do it, then let's go ahead and just put all of our money on the next guy that's 220 pounds running a 4.3 40 out there. So at the end of the day, man, I do wonder if that's just what it's going to come down to in some of these offenses. I mean, Keaton Mitchell, Isaiah Pacheco, even Devin Achane, okay, I understand Achane and even Keaton have, more just nuance to the position than Guerendo necessarily does. But at the end of the day, man, if you can just get the biggest, most athletic freak in that backfield possible and just give him a sliver of space in the right system, that can overcome a hell of a lot. So again, I know it's trendy and you see the guy absolutely blow up the combine. You start almost looking for reasons to, downgrade him. But man, for a running back without too much, just miles on the odometer already, I think when you have truly exceptional physical tools, I'm okay betting on these guys more so than others. And again, I'm talking about Isaac Guerendo here, not AD Mitchell, but it's another situation where, again, when we see guys literally with beyond elite athletic profiles, man, yeah, I'll bet on that.
100%, man. So there were 85 Power 5 running backs last year with 100 or more carries. He was 7th in yards after contact per attempt. Okay. And highest PFF, 17th highest PFF overall receiving grade.
There we go.
Okay. And among 62 Power 5 running backs with 20 plus targets, 3rd in yards per route run. All right. So yeah, he has a little bit of a package here in addition to his athleticism. So I like that call a lot. Let's shift to the quarterback position. What are your thoughts around shooting for the upside of Jayden Daniels as that, Konami code, cheat code quarterback over Caleb Williams in super flex rookie drafts? Is it crazy to do that? Is it crazy to think that way? And are we definitely taking Daniels over Drake Maye for fantasy?
Fantasy-wise, I do think Daniels deserves the nod over Drake Maye, but I'm still going Caleb over both those guys, in fantasy and real life. So real life rankings, if I was an NFL GM, which I'm happy I'm not. That seems like a very stressful job, to be honest with you. But I would go Caleb, Drake Maye, and then I do think there's a decent tier drop-off before you do get to Jayden Daniels. Washington Commanders apparently disagree, and that's fine. But just to your point, I mean, the Konami code upside of Jayden Daniels, it is really, enormous. I mean, 13.8 fantasy points per game over these past 2 seasons from only rushing production. Drake Maye was at 9.4. Caleb was at 8.6. But that's remarkable, man. I mean, Anthony Richardson, a guy that we have as a, top 5 quarterback going into 2024, he only averaged 10.4 fantasy points per game from rushing, during his time at Florida. So with Daniels, I love the Johnny Knoxville comp that Nate Tice gave him, because you see him just take these massive hits. Shout out to whoever made the Photoshop of him getting absolutely destroyed against Ole Miss, and then all the Sonic coins, coming out. These are the sorts of, gems we get during draft season. So, but with Daniels, needs to take better care of his body. I do think the pre-injury RG3 comp can make some sense. I don't really like the Lamar Jackson comp because Lamar is so creative off script. And with Jayden, it's one of those things where he's actually like a pretty, nuanced pocket passer until he gets through his progressions. And then it's like he puts his eyes down, he just takes off and he's running. So that's more so my concern for Jayden transitioning to be a great NFL quarterback. But hey, in fantasy land, man, we constantly see these quarterbacks that, one, have the arm strength to stretch defenses vertically, and two, the speed to really, force them to cover every square inch of the field horizontally, be better in fantasy than real life. I mean, that's why Josh Allen, even before he became a real life world beater in 2020, was still making, fantasy managers a lot of money in 2018 and 2019. So I think Daniels, even if his real life floor is lower than these other guys, fantasy floor, and accordingly, being a likely number 2 overall pick, we're going to get 4, more likely 5+ years of him getting these opportunities to, again, maybe make it and just be a perfectly great real life quarterback as well. But at a minimum, man, give us that rushing upside we need to go ahead and be a consistent, I think, top 12, top 15 fantasy quarterback. So I plan on making him one of my highest drafted quarterbacks this season. Last year was Anthony Richardson. I mean, we just always see these rookie quarterbacks with the rushing upside be a bit undervalued, I think, immediately upon coming out. It's like people need to see it to believe it at first. But, like what I always go back to, like Jayden Daniels, I'm in no way comping him to this player, but we had Taysom freaking Hill working as a legit quarterback 1 in fantasy. Why? Because of that pure rushing production. And I know Jayden can give us more than Taysom. So not always that hard when it comes to, again, prioritizing these rushing QBs. Wouldn't quite go over Caleb, because even if I'm not going as far as the, generational label, I do think that, just who would I expect to have the best 10-year career? I'm way more positive that Caleb's going to make it than Jayden.
100%. And the landing spot, if he ends up in Chicago, is going to be great. Not only that, they could potentially add an Odunze in that top 10. They have a lot of outs here. He has a lot of outs, and he has a little sneaky rushing ability too. I wouldn't be surprised if he has these 500-600 yard seasons with a couple touchdowns on the ground too. You know what I mean? So if you haven't really watched these prospects, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, because Caleb, I'm with you. Like, you look at he only averaged 3.9 yards per carry last year because the sacks take it out of it. So if you actually haven't been seeing the dude go out there with that wizardry, you might not get it. But what surprised me was, again, that same fantasy points per game from purely rushing production. Jayden's at 13.8. Drake Maye's at 9.4 and Caleb's at 8.6. I mean, that's the thing with Drake Maye. He actually gives you a bit more rushing upside than I think people are expecting. So I don't think he's ever going to be this 800+ yard rusher like Jayden could be. But hey, man, like everyone loves that Justin Herbert comp for Drake Maye. And Justin's someone that we've seen give us, 350 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. I think that's on the table definitely for Drake Maye and also Caleb Williams.
There's a lot of talk about the Vikings potentially trading up into the top 5 to grab JJ McCarthy. There's talk about the Giants potentially being interested there. And then there are those who don't believe McCarthy should even be in that top 10 conversation, maybe 11 to the Vikings, sure. But, giving up even more assets to potentially go after him into that top 5, do you think that's the right move to make for someone like McCarthy? Is he worth giving up all that draft capital for?
It's just the positional importance of quarterback, because again, you'll see most of the big boards, I think, understandably have him as more of this like top 30, top 40, prospect. But as we see, year in and year out, the quarterbacks will get pushed up over all the other positions. So I think McCarthy deserves to be a top 4 quarterback here. Like, as easy as it is to look at his production relative to Bo Nix or Michael Penix, like, okay, let's look at what these guys, and you can even say this about Jayden Daniels too. What if their college career ended after 3 years? What if we never got to see Daniels at LSU? What if we never saw Nix, post-Auburn career, or even, Penix after the Indiana season? So that's the thing with McCarthy, because everyone just wants to point to his lack of, production and, oh, why didn't he throw more if he's so good at it? I don't know. Going 27-1 as a starter, like, that's probably why, with Jim Harbaugh, who also didn't have Andrew freaking Luck airing the football out when he had him. So it's one of these things where, yes, I understand there are some red flags, and you look at, only X amount of pass attempts in the fourth quarter during his entire freaking career. Like, it is a little bit concerning. I would love to have a larger profile, but if we're not going to have a larger profile and we are projecting more on a guy, why wouldn't we do it on a former 5-star recruit? He finished his high school career at IMG Academy. Like, some people talking about McCarthy, I almost get like a Stetson Bennett vibe. Like, people think he was just along for the ride. If this dude didn't go to Michigan, he was going to go to Ohio State or one of these other 6 schools and probably put up way bigger numbers in a more pass-happy offense. So this is hardly a guy that got, drug around by his offensive environment. McCarthy happened to be in an offense that does love to run the hell out of the football. But if he wasn't, man, I just think we'd be looking at him completely differently. So very athletic. I mean, the 3-cone time was absolutely out of this world. I know he didn't actually run the 40, but based on what Michigan was saying, it does seem like he was a sub 4.6 guy. Arm strength, has some, growing up to do. But yeah, the dude wasn't legally allowed to drink when Michigan won the national championship. So again, it's just, I think we forget sometimes like how big of a difference it is, comparing a 21-year-old quarterback to this other group of guys who are already going to be 24 by the time their name is called. So when we look at, some of McCarthy's flaws, I'm way more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt versus someone like Nix or like Penix, who again has had 3 additional entire seasons to try to work out those flaws.
And these older quarterbacks, you mentioned Bo Nix, you mentioned Michael Penix, they seem to be like the scraps that some teams might have to settle for, near that 1-2 turn in the NFL draft. Denver Broncos, maybe I can see them potentially trading down, to get those guys and accumulate some picks maybe. Are either of these guys, in your opinion, can they be starter quality? Like, can they be good in the NFL? If you had to bet on one of them, who would it be?
I would probably bet on Penix having the higher ceiling overall. I do think Nix could become, an okay enough starter as well. And, we did see the circa draft odds, shout out to them for really giving us more than even a handful yesterday. But both these guys, their pick over-unders at 32.5. So really does seem, maybe okay, the Broncos do splurge on Nix at pick 12. Maybe the Raiders are going to go ahead and go after Penix, shortly thereafter. But even if they do fall into round 2, it's not like a complete, end to their potential to do some good things. So the thing that comes to me with Penix is just the fact that if you watch that Texas game, man, I know that was the first time a lot of people saw Penix out there. Like, to me, it was a different performance than what CJ Stroud was against Georgia, but it just showed the highs that he can reach during the course of a game. And if somehow, some way Penix can, replicate that performance on a more weekly basis at the next level, like that, I think could be one of the better, quarterbacks in this class. I mean, just the deep ball touch. And yeah, I know, when you're throwing to Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, those are 3 guys that are going to hear their names called within the top 100 picks. Like, life was made easy for Penix in a lot of those games. If you watch that Michigan State game, for example, like that's one of the worst 300+ yard, 5 touchdown performances I think you'll see out there. We had a legit, ball hitting the middle linebacker's hand. Somehow Polk turns it into a touchdown there. So I think just the overall highs for Penix as this vertical, passer could be a hell of a lot better. So Nix, again, I don't want to completely count him out either, because as much as he was this low ADOT point guard game manager at Oregon, I mean, if you guys do go back and watch some of those Auburn highlights, at least you see a guy that was very capable of running around, extending the play. Now, is he going to be able to find that perfect marriage as an older prospect? I would like to think that, again, we've probably already seen him max out a bit more than the other guys. But for my money's worth, again, just in terms of like the most impressive kind of games I've watched from a single quarterback while going through these guys, Penix versus Texas, Caleb Williams in 2022 versus Notre Dame was incredible, and that should always be the response. Oh, look at Caleb versus Notre Dame in 23. Look at him the year before, guys. We have more than one game to work off here. And then maybe Drake Maye in that bowl game. Was it against Oregon, I think, in 22? Awfully impressive as well. So some true highs being reached. And when Penix is going, man, he's going. And I'll also say, like, going back those Indiana years, yeah, pre-knee injuries, he was moving around a bit better. This dude threw for like 500 yards against Ohio State, back in the day, put some fear into us Columbus natives over there. So Michael Penix, man, again, I understand why he's not this consensus top 10 picks, but there were times where he looked like it.
I can see that, man. And, I kind of equate a lot of what he does to Jameis Winston, because when the highs are there, it's there, right? And I can see him being, fantasy relevant at times when he can get starts a little bit further into his career because of it. Because, if he has some weapons, he's going to chuck it down there, and he's going to make sure that, his guys have a chance, at making plays. And that's all we want from a fantasy perspective. If you're not going to be, a rushing quarterback, at least do something like that, and I would love that. And Bo Nix, like, I'm looking to see maybe he gets paired with Sean Payton, and plays in an offense that quick passing game and get the ball out of his hands quickly, accurate, I can see that, being somewhat successful. So we'll see, if these guys can pan out, at the next level.
It's one of these things, man, where like, and I know a common comp for Bo Nix actually has been Brock Purdy, but that's why, again, I don't want to. I'm old enough to remember when Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, and Daniel Jones, like all these guys
Right.
get drafted, and the majority of people are calling them a bust from day one. So, yeah, I think it's okay to, again, have guys we're feeling better about. Of course, we're going to have, our preferences and leans right now, but yeah, there's a big difference between Bo Nix going to Denver, which, okay, let's face it, probably not the greatest, offensive environment. Or, yeah, Kyle Shanahan says, you know what, Brock, I'm in love with Bo Nix. He's now our guy. Like, yeah, okay, I think I'll probably have a higher opinion on him at that point. The supporting cast, like, I certainly believe the quarterback is going to elevate that more than any other position out there. But a lot can change in a hurry here. Like, do we really think that every single quarterback that has played in Cleveland, Chicago, and Washington over the last 30 years, every single one has just sucked? Or maybe, just maybe, is that a common denominator? Yeah, New York, throw them in, shout out Eli. Yeah. But, the Jets, I guess we want to go down that road.
Yeah, talking about the Jets.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. But like, really, like, we're just saying every single one of these 30 plus quarterbacks, it sucks. Or maybe, just maybe, that organization, that common variable has a little something to do with it. So I know the teams can't exactly, look in the mirror and point the finger at that person. But yeah, man, it is, got to give these guys a little bit of a break sometimes.
I'm a Jets fan, which is why I can confirm
Sorry, bro.
that's true. Every quarterback that we draft is going to shit.
Dude, I was happen. What, Chad Pennington? Is that who we're hanging our hat on, I guess?
Yeah, that's our guy.
Those Mark Sanchez AFC Championship years?
That's our guy. That's our guy right there. Okay. We need that defense, ride that defense's coattails all the way to the AFC Championship, baby.
Oh, man.
And look at Geno Smith, man. It took him 10 years, but he ended up making his way out of it.
I was about to say, man, so I
had to shake it off.
And you mentioned it, like Bo Nix to Denver, Michael Penix to the Raiders. Like, those are the two spots that make the most sense. But we also have Schefter whispering, the Cowboys, the Rams, these teams without a quarterback necessarily tied down for 2025 and beyond. Like, I do think Geno Smith is the wild card here to actually be starting for someone else by the time, week one comes around. Because when he signed that contract, it wasn't even signing, they kept him on the roster past, February 15th, and just like enabled him to for sure be getting this $12.9 million or whatever. But Schefter's tweet was very carefully worded, and he brought up that, this is a good salary for the Seahawks to take or potentially for them to trade. And then later, when they did go ahead and trade for Sam Howell, Schefter called it like a competition for the starting job, and Mike McDonald has accordingly reiterated that. So I think Geno is for sure better than Sam Howell, and he should be the QB1 in Seattle. But man, if you do look at Denver and Vegas, like, does Sean Payton really come out of retirement just to risk it all with Bo Nix in year two, man? I don't really know if that's exactly lining up. But when you start going, through every roster, like what backup QBs really could be moved and actually represent, a marketable upgrade over these rookies, I think Geno Smith stands out.
And the trade for Sam Howell, is not just this random trade. I think it was, pretty calculated. This is a quarterback who put up some good numbers last year. He is capable. Maybe with the right coaching, he can get back to what he was, earlier in his career at North Carolina. And I think this is a situation where, if Geno Smith does get moved, you have this quarterback who could potentially do some things, in a pretty stable franchise. So, that's going to be interesting to watch. So let's move to these wide receiver prospects. Obviously, a very deep and stacked class here. I'm going to skip the big three. There's only big me. Okay. Sorry, I had to throw something in there for the culture. Okay.
Love it.
The two guys that I'm having the most trouble with personally in terms of evaluating them at the next level is Xavier Worthy and Troy Franklin. Like, they both have very good production profiles. Worthy does a little bit more, I think, on multiple levels of the field. Franklin, has speed, but he had the real suspect combine, both undersized. And the question is, maybe I'm wrongly bucketing them together. But, can their skill sets translate to the next level? Can they be consistent fantasy options?
I'm more optimistic for Xavier Worthy, I think. I mean, we saw it from him, 3 years at Texas. Well, not like he just ran, the fastest 40 ever at the combine. And then we were like, oh, yeah, by the way, this guy was, decent over there. Like, he was doing his thing. A.D. Mitchell, who am open to arguments about him being better than Worthy, but at a minimum, I mean, kudos to Worthy for outproducing him, in the same offense during that 23 season. And let's face it, Texas fans know wasn't exactly getting the most pristine ball placement from Quinn Ewers, on a game-by-game basis. So when I looked at Worthy, man, I did, I'm looking at my prospect comps. I kind of jot down as I go. Like the John Ross stuff is lazy, but I think Xavier Worthy could be like who we wanted KJ Hamler to be. I have Khalif Raymond, and I mean that as a huge compliment there because Khalif's a guy who, underutilized. So no, I'm not saying, Worthy's going to be a backup receiver, but he's not only this field stretcher talent, but you can throw him these short screens and he's going to create after the catch. So yeah, maybe there could be a bit of a D-Jax, upside for him there. But with Troy Franklin, man, like, he has that smoothness to his game. I know Chris Olave is a common comp, but just when he is that small, I know Worthy's not big either. Like you don't see Franklin making the same sort of, yak goodness out of nothing that I think Worthy does have on his film during his time at Texas. So you got to put a safety, on Franklin's side, but he's not putting that same sense of fear into your defense I think Worthy has. And also just looking at the two, watching their big plays and everything like that, I do think, you see that Oregon scheme and just being in such a good all-around offense, popping up and really handing Franklin, I think, some easier touchdowns than what Worthy was necessarily dealing with. So I would go Worthy over Franklin. I think, they're still within 2 or 3 wide receiver spots of another. But to me, again, just comes down to the idea that, to your initial point, I think Worthy strikes far more fear into the defense, both in the underneath areas and also going deep. Franklin, could be a bit more pigeonholed as like a Darnell Mooney, kind of more of a one-trick pony field stretcher.
Totally get that, man. And, it's like, the fact that he was able, Xavier Worthy was able to produce, as a true freshman, the way he did, 30% down, he went over 30% dominator rating his freshman year. Like the dude produced, man. And even with AD Mitchell there, he's continued to outproduce him,
Yeah.
So what do we do when the production profile stinks? But then you watch them and you're like, well, this guy looks good. Like, look at AD Mitchell, right? Production, efficiency, all terrible. Xavier Worthy outproducing him, but then you watch him, right? And you're like, this guy can ball, and I think a lot of, what he does could translate to the next level. Like, how do we handle prospects like this?
Does his production stink, man? Like, this is what's been annoying.
Yeah.
Dude, as a freshman at Georgia with Brock Bowers and God knows how many other future NFLers, like, finds his way to get a major role. And okay, I mean, goes for 560 yards and 7 touchdowns in 21 games. I understand that's not the biggest, just booms ever, but played in 5 college football playoff games, scored 5 touchdowns, and then goes to Texas. And apparently 845 yards and 11 touchdowns is bad. So I've seen the yards per route run. I understand where this stuff is coming from. And no, he didn't dominate out of the gate like we see some other guys doing, but who has at Georgia, man, since like AJ Green? It's one of those programs where we consistently see stud players be forced into complementary roles. And honestly, when you do pull up that tape, you did see AD Mitchell consistently making the most out of it. I mean, the common critique for this dude is like he's not running his routes at full speed when he knows the ball's not going his way. Some people point to the run blocking, but I'm really curious, man. As someone who watches a lot of film, I'm really curious how many people out there that consider themselves film grinders are truly going through every single, AD Mitchell run blocking play and, trying to really critique this. I see Dane Brugler saying he's always looking for someone out there to block. So I don't know, man. You can talk about Xavier Worthy maybe having some questionable route running laziness issues or whatever you want to call it in the same offense at Texas. So maybe has something to do more so with what they're doing, there down south. So with Mitchell, at the end of the day, man, you said it. You put on the film and you see a guy who is 6'2", 205, confirmed, using the sort of, route running nuance and just long speed that we're typically seeing from guys that, are 3 inches shorter and weigh 30 pounds less. So whether it's, the go-ahead touchdown against Ohio State, beating freaking Denzel Burke, who's going to be a first-round cornerback, next year, using like the head fakes, again, running the sorts of routes that we just don't really see from players his size. And as much as you might want to call him this like field stretcher, 4.3, 4.40. Okay, he can go deep, but what else can he do for you when in the red zone? I think Matt Harmon knows what he's talking about, and he's got him as like an 80% plus success rate, running digs and even out routes, which we do see pop him on film against man coverage as well. So He's not a perfect prospect. There's a reason why no one's saying he should be in the top 3 alongside Marv, Neighbors, and Odunze or anything like that. But man, when you see these high-end flashes, when you see a guy, dude, RAS score, fifth since freaking 1986 or whatever the hell their just database goes back to. Shout out to the RAS score bosses. But like, this is the sort of guy I want to be betting on. So, been at just blue blood programs. He only transferred back to Texas to be closer to his daughter. He was in an offense with 3 additional skill position players that are going to hear their names called within the top 100 picks, most likely. Yeah, again, with these sort of players, I want to bet on the athletic freaks. And I think Mitchell has shown more than enough, with the underlying stuff to, overtake a bit of a concern with his yards per out run and things like that. Final note, because again, trying to quantify what we're seeing on film here. And one of my favorite stats is unrealized air yards, more common in the NFL. But based on just the mock draft database, top 30 wide receivers, nobody had more unrealized air yards last year than A.D. Mitchell. And I even had, I love when this happens, when someone comments on one of my tweets with an even better stat than I was able to gather from it. But bear with me for just 1 second. Yeah, tweets by Sneaky Joe. If you gave A.D. Mitchell just half of his unrealized air yards, he'd be second in the class in yards per route run behind only Marvin Harrison Jr. So yes, I understand a lot of these wide receivers have these misses, but you watch the film with A.D. Mitchell a little bit longer and you're going to see them popping in a hurry. Josh Norris noted, I think he only had 15 total targets his entire career that were behind the line of scrimmage to 4 yards downfield. So, yeah, guess what? Texas, they had Xavier Worthy. Like, they weren't in the business. And Georgia had Brock Bowers. Like, nothing about Mitchell's profile was him ever getting spoon-fed easy production. I think he can do that at the next level, though, if asked.
And Matt Harmon calls them layup routes, right? And that's not something that A.D. Mitchell had a whole lot of, right? Xavier Worthy, that was his role, a lot of underneath stuff. And who was their deep receiver? That was A.D. Mitchell. Who was their quarterback? Someone not that great. So, when you put 2 and 2 together, you're like, well, you know what? Like, this might not show up on the stat sheet, right? You look at someone like him, compare him to, other potential first-round wide receivers. And this guy, if you're looking at draft capital, you're like, well, first-round draft capital. He runs big boy routes, as Matt Harmon likes to call him. He is able to play that X receiver role. Very good against man coverage. And, you talk about the lazy stuff. Like, it wasn't just him. It was other players on the team who knew they weren't getting the ball in that play. when half the field almost shut down. Right. And it wasn't just him. So in the routes that he was serious on, and I think that's not going to be the case in the NFL. Like, that's something that you might see in college. You don't see that in the NFL. Right. So I don't think that's something that we would have to worry about, especially from a first round caliber talent. So, you look at him versus Brian Thomas Jr., Brian Thomas Jr., he has a little bit more development to do, in my opinion. And he does really, really well. But then A.D. Mitchell might have a little bit more variety to him and does all those things well. So this is somebody that I think, despite the analytics, I think this is somebody that we should be targeting in dynasty rookie drafts.
And it's also worth noting, Adam Levitan and Adam Schefter on the Established and Run podcast, and he asked Schefter, like, who's someone that's going to go higher than what the consensus thinks, and he threw Mitchell out there as someone that, projected to go between pick 25 and pick 32, and Schefter's like, yeah, I'm pretty confident he's going to be going higher than that. So, hey, he's not a perfect prospect, but who is after these top 3 guys? I just feel like we're almost holding Mitchell's like negatives against him more than some of these other dudes. Like, so again, no, like, he's not a foolproof landing spot, independent guy, I think, but you tell me we're not going to be excited if he, we see the Buffalo Bills call his name. Come on.
That's exactly what I was getting at. Is he the pick there? Like, I kind of feel like the wide receiver that I want the Bills to grab, maybe move up a little bit to get him. Like, are you going to be able to get him at 28? Like what you just said with Adam Schefter, like about Adam Schefter saying that A.D. Mitchell might be taken a little bit higher than that. Like, I kind of feel like he would be the perfect replacement, as their X receiver. They already have, a decent slot receiver in Khalil Shakir. They already have a decent flanker in Curtis Samuel. I feel like he just like, you just like stick him at the X and you should be okay to go. Like, is there a chance that they go up and grab like someone like Rome Odunze? That's a lot of draft capital to give up.
I don't
maybe
think
settle for A.D. Mitchell.
I don't think so, man. I think he honestly, yeah, he's that prototypical X. He can be a faster Gabe Davis. I think there's a better overall receiver than Gabe Davis. I mean, I love I think the George Pickens comp for A.D. Mitchell makes a lot of sense. Pickens is someone that I think would be putting up way bigger numbers in, a more quarterback friendly, pass happy offense. So maybe not as much dogging him as someone like George Pickens, but hey, Pickens is another guy that's facing, some question marks with his, play to play effort and things like that. So high end outcome, maybe like a T Higgins or something. But even if I see the DJ Chark, tag being thrown around a lot and people perceive that as a negative. My man's went for over 1,000 yards, had 8 touchdowns with Gardner Minshew as his quarterback second year in the league. So there's always going to be a place for these big bodied wide receivers that can run a freaking 4.3, man. Look at MVS. Like, that's your worst case, and this dude has still made some critical plays, for winning teams, and he sure made himself a hell of a lot of money. So, yeah, I'm very hopeful that A.D. Mitchell is going to be better than MVS. Don't get me wrong, but, again, these are the sort of wide receivers where if A.D. Mitchell is your number 3 wide receiver, I'll take that over Michael Gallup and some of these other players that I just don't think put the same sort of fear into opposing defenses.
Ian, who is your sleeper wide receiver in this class?
Ooh, we'll see where he ends up going, man. But in terms of a guy that could really outperform his draft capital, because I think he's probably going to fall because some off the field stuff, is Jermaine Burton. And yeah, can't be punching female fans wearing Tennessee colors, right after you go ahead and lose that game. So that's kind of you see people on Twitter like, oh, this Jermaine Burton guy, how come he's not getting more hype? It's like, yeah, it doesn't take that long to really find out why there. But again, that aside, let's face it, Tyreek Hill and other players haven't exactly had the best, histories going into the NFL draft and everything. So Burton is that guy, again, with the blue blood pass going from Georgia to Alabama. You turn on the film and you just see, again, a polished route runner for a guy that also isn't exactly scrawny out there. So we'll see where he ends up going. I'm not trying to name a, early round 2 wide receiver, which he could end up being, and it'll make me look like a, jackass here calling him a sleeper of sorts. But hey, if he does end up falling to a day 3 and getting going, that could be the case. But I know in our handy dandy show sheet, which kudos to you, man, true professional providing that. But I do think more times than not, man, for as much as we want to say this year's Puka Nacua and stuff, these day 3 wide receivers, they seldom work out, man. I mean, we're talking about over the past 11 years now. There's Tyreek Hill and there's now Puka Nacua as the only day 3 or on wide receivers to post top 24 production as rookies. So I'm not saying they can't work out, in a longer sample size and stuff and, get better over the course of their career. But man, rookie wide receivers as a whole, I do think we generally overrate because we just talk about them, every single February through April. And then accordingly, guess what? The NFL pretty good at their jobs, and the round 1, round 2, to a lesser extent, round 3 guys not only are going to be just more talented than the other guys, of course, billion-dollar franchises, I think are going to make better moves than what we're doing more times than not, but also they just get more opportunities. I think it was Trent Sherfield, I think, was actually talking about this, where he started his career, I think it was in Miami, and he was just straight up out. He wouldn't name the guy, but he said he was just day in, day out outperforming the higher draft picks. And coaches pretty much told him straight up, hey, man, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be getting these opportunities right now. So as much as we would like to believe that, every position in the NFL is a meritocracy, draft capital really does matter. And, as much as we love to have our, Excel sheets or models, whatever you want to call them, I'm sure Dwayne mentioned, yeah, guess what? The number 1 correlated factor is over any stat, over any dominator ranking, over anything, it does end up being draft capital. So there are some ways we can see that, but man, if you're not getting that at least day 2 draft capital, not too many Amon-Ra St. Browns coming year after year.
I got to ask you a question as a Jets fan, okay? And I'm asking this question to everyone that comes on. If Rome Odunze is on the board for the Jets, should they draft him or Brock Bowers at 10?
Ooh, probably
it's kind of a pipe dream for me, that Odunze would even be there at 10.
Yeah,
but you never know. So who you?
I don't think he's making it past the Bears at 9, but no, I'll go Rome over Bowers. As much as you don't want to go ahead and, give him that Davante Adams level comp. He really, I think prime Allen Robinson is more adept for kind of what Rome brings to the table, just in terms of being able to win in all facets of the game, being an 8 out of 10 in everything, even if he's not, the 10 out of 10 in anything particular. So I will say, just quick side note, contested catch rate, guys, it's cool, but Can we realize that, dude, Rome last year, it was like, what, 21 of 28 contested catch rate. Year before, he was 4 for 16. So it's kind of a fluky stat, I think. And it just gets in trouble, man. When you actually go through and you start watching what these companies are calling contested catches, like there'll be random freaking plays 3 yards from the line of scrimmage or just like a defensive back on his back. Like, I think the way we want to measure it, and a better way of measure it would be, 10, 15 yards downfield. Like, we look at it as like the 50-50 contested catch jump balls. And Rome's really good at them. That's not even what I'm trying to say, but I just think we can do a better job maybe of measuring that down the road. So give me Rome over Brock Bowers. I'm writing up Bowers tomorrow, and I'm not denying that he can't be, a game changer at the next level. But, it's one of these things where every single first-round tight end over these years just isn't even getting a second contract seemingly with their original team. And shout out to Laporta, shout out to Kincaid. But, hey, if Bowers is going to make it to the Jets, I think he could put up similar numbers to those guys and everything. Don't get me wrong, but he does need to go to an offense that's going to be willing to use him more like a slot receiver than a pure tight end, which brings me into a question I keep asking. What is stopping Bowers from saying, hey, guys, I actually identify as a wide receiver? Get ahead of that so you don't have to go to arbitration like Jimmy Graham and Mike Gesicki 4 years down the line, because pull up the franchise tag numbers. Wide receivers make double what tight ends do, and it doesn't really, make sense to me why they do, but they do. So, Bowers, start calling yourself a wide receiver, man. Come on.
Exactly. I'll be doing the same thing if I was him, man. 100%. You have to.
Yeah.
Ian, thank you for joining the show, man.
Hell yeah,
this
bro.
Is awesome.
Thanks for having me. You're awesome.
You probably are already following him, but if you're not following Ian on Twitter, do yourself a favor and go follow him. It's at Hartitz on Twitter. Legit, the funniest guy on the platform in our space. Go check out his articles and his podcast over at fantasylife.com. Tons of free content and resources at your disposal. At your disposal. Definitely not disposable. Okay. Definitely not disposable. At your disposal. Ian and the entire Fantasy Life team do an amazing job over there. All the links will be in the description for you. See you guys later. Hey, man. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. All right, guys. Take it easy. Bye-bye.